My name is Alex, I'm 32 years old, and I build things for a living. Not just houses, but a life my family never thought I was capable of. The moment it all came to a head wasn't in a boardroom or on a construction site, it was at my in-laws' house, over a dinner of dry roast chicken and polite, strained conversation. As I was helping to clear the table, I sidestepped to avoid their yapping little dog and accidentally, gently, bumped into my wife's mother, Eleanor. She stumbled, catching herself on the back of a chair. Before I could even finish saying I'm so sorry, her hand whipped through the air and connected with my cheek with a crack that seemed to silence the entire room. She slapped me. Hard. Not a playful tap, but a full force, stinging slap fueled by some perceived slight I couldn't begin to comprehend. The shock was like a plunge into ice water, but underneath it, something else stirred. It was the feeling of a dam, one I had been building inside me my entire life to hold back a flood of disrespect and neglect, finally developing a fatal crack. That slap wasn't just about a clumsy accident, it was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as less than, and it was the catalyst that would force me to finally confront the people who taught me that was all I deserved, my own family. What happened next would expose a secret I had kept for over a decade, shatter my family's entitled reality, and change the course of all of our lives forever. Before I continue with this story, I want you to hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt completely invisible or disrespected by the very people who were supposed to be in your corner. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a moment where you just knew, deep in your soul, that things were about to change for good. To understand why a slap from my mother-in-law could trigger such a seismic shift, you have to understand the ground I was standing on, the foundation laid for me in childhood. I grew up in a house with two sons, but only one was ever truly seen. My older brother, Leo, was the golden child. He was charismatic, athletic, and effortlessly charming. He had our father's easy smile and our mother's flair for the dramatic. He was the sun, and I was the planet in a far-flung, chilly orbit. While Leo was out being the life of the party, I was the quiet one. I was practical, more interested in taking things apart to see how they worked than I was in chasing a soccer ball. My parents, particularly my father who was a smooth-talking salesman, interpreted my introversion as a defect. He valued slick presentation over substance, and I had none of it. My mother, in turn, dedicated her life to orbiting Leo, enabling his every whim and polishing his shine. Leo got a brand new car for his 16th birthday. I was handed a bus schedule and told it builds character. When Leo wanted to go to an expensive out-of-state university to major in communications, my parents cashed in bonds and took out loans without a second thought. When I graduated high school with honors and a clear plan to enter a trade school for carpentry, my father scoffed. Manual labor, he'd said, disappointment thick in his voice. Alex, you need to use your head, not just your hands. Look at your brother. They told me if I wanted further education, I'd have to pay for it myself. So I did. The pattern was set early and reinforced daily. Leo's series of failed startups, a t-shirt company, a DJ service, a disastrous attempt at being a day trader, were all lauded as ambitious ventures and funded by my parents. My steady, focused work was dismissed as a dirty job, something you do when you can't do anything better. I was the reliable, invisible backup system, while Leo was the star of the show, and I learned early on that if I wanted anything in this life, I would have to build it myself, from the ground up, with no help from them. My salvation came in the form of a man named Mr. Henderson. He was a local carpenter, an old-school craftsman with sawdust in his veins and a quiet wisdom in his eyes. I started working for him when I was 16, sweeping floors and hauling lumber just to get out of the house. But Mr. Henderson saw something in me that my own father never did. He saw my patience, my meticulous attention to detail, and the genuine joy I took in creating something real and tangible. He took me under his wing and became the mentor and father figure I so desperately needed. He didn't just teach me how to frame a wall or cut a perfect dovetail joint, he taught me about business. Your hands build the value, Alex, he'd say, tapping his temple, but your head has to know what it's worth and how to sell it. Don't ever let anyone tell you this isn't a thinking man's game. While my family thought I was just a low-wage grunt, earning minimum wage, I was absorbing a lifetime of knowledge. After I graduated high school, I went to work for him full-time. I lived like a monk, saving every single penny. I drove a beat-up old pickup truck, packed my own lunch, and poured all my energy into learning the trade and the business. My family barely noticed, other than the occasional condescending remark from my father about when I was going to get a real career. 5 years later, Mr. Henderson decided to retire. He sat me down in his small, dusty office and made me an offer that changed my life. He sold me the business, the tools, the truck, the client list, everything, for a symbolic sum. "You're the son I never had, Alex," he told me, his voice thick with emotion. Carry on the name with pride. I did him one better. I honored his legacy by building on it. I renamed the company, modernized our systems, and began to pivot from small repairs to high-end custom renovations and eventually, new home builds. I had a knack for it. I understood quality, and I knew how to manage a crew and a budget. The business exploded. Secretly, quietly, I was becoming wealthy. But my lifestyle didn't change. I still drove a work truck, albeit a much newer and more expensive one. I still wore work boots and jeans. I bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood and started renovating it myself. It was during this time that I met Sarah, and she fell in love with Alex the carpenter, not Alex the successful business owner. For the first time, I felt seen for who I was, not what I had. And I kept my success a secret from my family. It wasn't a malicious deception, not at first. It was a defense mechanism. My success was the one thing that was truly mine, untainted by their judgment or their inevitable attempts to claim a piece of it. The car ride home from my in-laws' house was silent for the first 10 minutes. Sarah just sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her hands clenched into tight fists in her lap. I could feel the sting on my cheek beginning to throb, a physical reminder of the humiliation. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes flashing with a protective fire I had never seen before. "We are never, ever going back to their house again until she calls you and gives you a genuine, heartfelt apology," she said, her voice low and firm. "What she did was inexcusable. I am so sorry, Alex. No one should ever treat you like that." Hearing that from her, feeling that unconditional support, was like a healing balm on a wound I didn't even realize was still open. For my entire life, whenever I had been slighted or dismissed, the response from my own family was always to tell me I was being too sensitive or that I had probably done something to deserve it. Sarah's outrage on my behalf was a revelation. That slap, and Sarah's reaction to it, solidified a decision that had been hardening in my gut for years. I was done being a doormat. I was done accepting disrespect as my due. A few days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her tone was syrupy sweet, a clear sign she wanted something. She mentioned she had spoken to Sarah's mom. "I heard there was a little bit of a misunderstanding the other night," she began, completely trivializing the incident. "You know how Eleanor can be, so high-strung. You probably should have been more careful moving around her." No apology, no concern. Just blame, shifted right back onto me. But that wasn't the real reason for her call. She quickly pivoted. "Listen, honey, your father and I want to have a family dinner this weekend. It's very important. We need to talk about something." "About Leo?" I could hear the manufactured urgency in her voice. "Leo had another brilliant idea," she explained, something that was a sure thing this time. The implication was clear. They weren't just inviting me to dinner, they were summoning me to a meeting where my role, as always, was to be the supporting cast in the endless drama of Leo, the golden child. The timing was almost poetic. Just as I had decided to stand up for myself, they were preparing to push me down once again. We walked into my parents' house that Sunday, and the air was thick with expectation. Sarah held my hand, a silent, grounding presence at my side. My brother Leo was pacing in the living room, radiating a nervous energy that he tried to mask with his usual brand of forced charisma. My father stood by the fireplace, trying to look patriarchal and wise, while my mother fluttered around, offering drinks and making small talk. After a tense dinner, my father cleared his throat, signaling the main event was about to begin. "All right, everyone," he said, Leo has an exciting opportunity he wants to share with us. Leo launched into his pitch. It was for a subscription box service for artisanal, gluten-free dog toys. It was, without a doubt, one of the most ridiculous ideas I had ever heard. He had mock-ups, a poorly designed website, and a lot of buzzwords, but no coherent business plan. He finished his presentation with the grand finale. He needed $50,000 to get it off the ground. A heavy silence fell over the room before my father turned his gaze on me. His expression was a mixture of condescension and command. "Alex," he began, his voice taking on a tone of magnanimous authority. "You've been working that little contracting job of yours for, what, over a decade now? You're a frugal guy. You must have a little nest egg saved up. Your brother needs a hand to get this thing started. We all need to pull together as a family." He paused for dramatic effect. "We figured you could loan him, say, $5,000. It would be a good start and show your support." The insult of it all was breathtaking. After all these years, they saw me as so small, so insignificant, that $5,000 was the most they could imagine I could possibly contribute. They didn't see a man, they saw a piggy bank with a meager amount of change inside. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. I took a deep breath. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a saw. My father's face darkened. "What do you mean, no? He's your brother. After everything we've done for you, you can't spare a little to help him? What is wrong with you? Is it because your mother-in-law finally put you in your place the other day?" And that was it. The crack in the dam shattered. I pushed my chair back and stood up slowly. "Actually, Dad, yes. That's part of it," I said, my voice gaining strength. That slap made me realize I'm done being disrespected by anyone. I looked from my father, to my mother, to my brother. "You think I have a little job? You want to borrow $5,000 as if it's the sum of my life's work?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "My company's payroll is $50,000 a week. The beat-up work truck you all make fun of is a $60,000 custom-outfitted vehicle. That the simple house that Sarah and I live in? I didn't just buy it, I designed and built it myself, and it's paid off." I looked directly at Leo. "I could write you a check for the $50,000 you need right now and my bank account wouldn't even feel it. But I won't. I'm not giving you, or any of you, another dime. Because respect and my money is earned, not demanded." The stunned, slack-jawed silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard in that house. The silence was absolute. My father's face was a mottled red, his mouth slightly agape. My mother looked like she had seen a ghost. It was Leo who broke the spell, his voice a sputtering, incredulous whisper. "You're lying. There's no way. You're a carpenter." I looked at my brother, not with anger, but with a profound sense of pity. He couldn't conceive of a world where I, the quiet, overlooked brother, could possibly have eclipsed him. "I own a construction company, Leo. A very successful one. While you were pitching ideas, I was building an empire, one 2x4 at a time." It was then that I saw the shift. It was most visible on my mother's face. The shock dissolved, and in its place, a slow, calculating greed began to dawn in her eyes. Her expression softened, and she took a step towards me. "Alex, son," she cooed, her voice dripping with a sweetness that turned my stomach. "We didn't know. We had no idea. Well, if you're doing so well, then of course you should help your brother. It's what families do." My father, recovering his composure, quickly followed her lead. He puffed out his chest, trying to reclaim his authority. "See? I always knew you had it in you, son. A real chip off the old block," he boomed, a lie so blatant it was almost funny. "Now, let's be sensible about this. Your brother needs the money. It's the right thing to do." The speed with which they pivoted from dismissal to entitlement was dizzying and sickening. They didn't see me. They didn't care about my hard work or my journey. They just saw a new, much larger bank vault they could raid. I held up my hand, stopping them in their tracks. "No," I said again, and this time my voice was like ice. Let me be perfectly clear. The bank of Alex is closed. It was never actually open to you in the first place, you just assumed it was. This conversation, and conversations like it for the rest of our lives, is over. I turned to Sarah, who was already rising from her chair, her eyes shining with pride. I took her hand. We're leaving. As we walked towards the front door, my father's voice, now shaking with rage, bellowed after us. You can't do this. You don't just walk out on your family. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob, and looked back at them one last time. You walked out on me years ago, I said, my voice devoid of heat, filled only with a calm, final certainty. I'm just finally closing the door you left open, and with that, we walked out into the cool night air, leaving them standing in the ruins of their own making. The fallout was immediate and predictable. The very next day, the manipulation campaign began in earnest. My mother was the first to strike, her weapon of choice being emotional blackmail. She called me, her voice thick with practiced tears. How could you be so cruel, Alex? So heartless? Your brother is devastated. He looks up to you, and you just humiliated him in front of everyone. When I didn't respond the way she wanted, she hung up, only to text me an hour later saying my coldness was literally making her sick with worry. My father took a different approach. His messages were blunt instruments of anger and accusation. You have dishonored this family, one text read. Your selfishness is a disgrace. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. The irony of that statement was so profound it almost made me laugh. Leo, meanwhile, took to social media. He didn't name me directly, but he posted a series of vague, passive-aggressive statuses about how some people forget where they come from when they get a little success, and how family is supposed to have your back, not stab you in it. It was a pathetic attempt to paint himself as the victim. My lifeline through all of this was my chosen family. Sarah was my shield, my fiercest defender. She fielded my mother's hysterical calls, blocked their numbers from my phone when it became too much, and every single day, she would look me in the eye and remind me that I had done the right thing. My worth, she insisted, was not negotiable. My work crew, led by my foreman and best friend, Dave, provided a different kind of support. When I told Dave what had happened, he just slapped me on the back and said, "So the boss is a secret mogul, eh? Does this mean we get a pizza party?" Their unwavering loyalty and good-natured ribbing was a balm to my soul. They were my real brothers. The most validating call came from my Aunt Carol, my dad's sister. She had always been on the periphery, a quiet observer of our family's skewed dynamics. "Alex, I heard what happened," she said, her voice warm. "Your mother is telling anyone who will listen that you've become a reclusive millionaire and you're hoarding your fortune out of spite. Don't you listen to a word of it. I've seen how they've treated you your entire life. You don't owe them a thing. I'm proud of you for finally standing up, holding on to those voices, Sarah's, Dave's, Aunt Carol's." I held firm. I refused to engage. The silence was my answer. For them, it was a punishment. For me, it was peace. Several months passed in that blessed, quiet peace. I poured my energy into my work, my marriage, and myself. My company landed a major contract to build a new community center, a project that filled me with a deep sense of purpose. Sarah and I started seriously talking about starting a family of our own, a family we would build on a foundation of mutual respect and unconditional love. I also started seeing a therapist, someone to help me unpack the 2 decades of emotional baggage I had been carrying. It was hard work, untangling the knots of neglect and learning to validate myself, but with every session, I felt lighter, stronger. News from my old family trickled in through Aunt Carol. As I had predicted, my parents, blinded by their devotion to Leo and desperate to fund his ridiculous dream, had taken out a massive second mortgage on their paid-off home. Leo, with $50,000 of their money in his pocket, launched his artisanal dog toy business. It was a spectacular, unmitigated disaster. He burned through the entire loan in less than 3 months on a fancy office space, a flashy car, and marketing to his handful of social media followers. The business never shipped a single box. Now, the consequences of their lifelong pattern of irresponsible favoritism were coming home to roost. The bank was threatening foreclosure. The shiny car my father had been so proud of for years was repossessed. They had tried to borrow money from other relatives, but Aunt Carol had quietly, firmly told everyone the real story, and no one was willing to throw good money after bad. They were financially ruined, facing the loss of everything they had worked their lives for, all because they couldn't stop enabling their golden child. I didn't feel joy at their misfortune. There was no triumphant "I told you so," there was just a quiet, somber sense of vindication. It was the universe balancing the scales, delivering the natural outcome of their choices. I was healing, building a beautiful life on the foundation I had laid for myself. They were sinking, trapped in the crumbling structure they had built for Leo. One afternoon, I came home from a job site to find a letter in the mailbox. It was a single, plain white envelope with my name and address written in my father's familiar, spidery handwriting. Not a text, not an email. A letter. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. I was prepared for more anger, more blame, more demands. But it was none of those things. It wasn't a perfect apology, it was stilted, awkward, and saturated with the pride of a man who didn't know how to admit defeat. But it contained the words I thought I would never, ever hear from him. "Alex," it began. I was wrong. For years, I was so focused on what I thought success was supposed to look like, the easy charm, the quick pitch, that I was completely blind to the real man you were becoming right in front of me. I was proud of Leo's talk because it was easy. Your work, your quiet strength. I didn't understand it, so I dismissed it. I see now that the success you built with your own two hands is the only kind that has any real value. We are losing the house. Leo had to get a job in a warehouse. I am not writing this to ask you for money. I am writing to ask if my son will talk to me. I read it 3 times, letting the words sink in. I showed it to Sarah, who read it and simply asked, "What do you want to do, Alex?" Her support was in the question itself. The decision was mine. I decided to meet him. We met at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between our houses. He looked smaller than I remembered, older and deeply tired. The arrogant bluster was gone, replaced by a raw, humbling shame. He told me everything. He told me how my mother cried every day, not because of what they had done, but because her vision of their perfect family was shattered. He told me that Leo was furious at the world, unable to accept his own failure. And then he looked me in the eye, and apologized again, this time with a cracking voice. "I failed you, son. As a father, I failed you in that moment. I made a choice. I didn't offer to pay off their mortgage. I didn't offer to rescue them. Their consequences were their own to bear. Instead, I offered them something more valuable. I can't fix your finances," I said calmly. "That's your responsibility. But if you want to have a relationship with me, and with Sarah, and with the grandchildren you might have one day, it will be on new terms. It will be based on respect. And it will not happen unless you are willing to get help for how you see the world." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Okay, son. Okay, it wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning." Looking back on it all now, it's strange to think that the whole avalanche was started by a slap. That moment of shocking disrespect from my mother-in-law, who, I should mention, did eventually offer a tearful and profuse apology after a very direct conversation with Sarah, was a bizarre and painful gift. It was the external shock that was finally powerful enough to break the internal patterns I had been trapped in my whole life. It woke me from a long sleep of acceptance. The greatest lesson in this entire journey has been about the nature of worth. For so long, I thought my value was something that would be granted to me by my family if I just worked hard enough or was quiet enough or successful enough. I was wrong. Self-worth isn't a gift someone else gives you, it's a structure you have to build for yourself. You have to pour the foundation with self-respect, refusing to let others treat you poorly. You have to frame the walls with firm boundaries, teaching people how you expect to be treated. And you have to furnish the rooms with people who see you, who celebrate you, and who love you for the person you are, not for what you can do for them. My relationship with my father is slowly, cautiously, being rebuilt. He comes to my job site sometimes, not saying much, just watching my crew and me work, a new, quiet respect in his eyes. My mother and Leo are a much harder project. They are still mired in their grief for the fantasy life they thought they were owed. Maybe one day they'll find their way out. My life today isn't a fairy tale, but it's real, and it's mine. It's filled with the love of my incredible wife, the loyalty of my friends and crew, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I built it all on a bedrock of truth and strength. And the most important lesson of all was learning what family truly means. It isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about the people who see your value even when you can't, like Mr. Henderson. It's the people who stand with you when you're under attack, like Sarah and my crew. That is my family. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever had to fight to be seen by the very people who should have seen you all along, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. And I really want to know, so tell me in the comments, what is one boundary you set that changed your entire life? I promise you, I'll be reading every single one.